Hello, welcome to SkepVet TV. I'm Dr. Brennan McKenzie and I'm the SkepVet. Today I want to talk about a subject that I hear about frequently from my clients, natural remedies. People are always asking me if there is a natural remedy they can use, something that is perhaps safer or more gentle than conventional pharmaceutical remedies. And I think this is an important question because it gets to the core of how we decide what's useful and helpful for our pets and what isn't. So first of all, the challenge with talking about natural remedies is deciding what the term means. What is natural? We assume that natural is something that is taken directly from nature and not really processed in any significant way by human beings. So if I find a plant growing in the woods and I take it and I eat it, intending that to be a remedy of some kind for disease, well, that's clearly natural. Usually natural is contrasted with artificial. If something is created in a laboratory from basic chemicals and then put into a pill and used as a remedy, people would consider that artificial. But it's a little more difficult, really, to make this distinction in practice. If, for example, I take a plant that's growing in the wild and I take it out of the wild and I cultivate it intentionally as a remedy, and then I take the leaves of the plants at a certain time of year and I chop them up and I dry them, and then I put them in a capsule, or maybe I mix them with some other plant material or animal materials and put them in a capsule and give them as a therapy, is that still natural? It's very rare that you take your dog out to a forest and pick plants for them to eat and then use that as a remedy. So when we're talking about something natural, even something like an herbal remedy, most of the time we're talking about something that has been deliberately cultivated and processed in some way by human beings. It gets more complicated when you look at remedies like acupuncture or massage or chiropractic. In what sense is creating an entire system of medicine over thousands of years based on all sorts of concepts about how health and disease work, like yin and yang and wind and damp and qi, and then using that to guide the use of surgically sterilized needles poked into the body at certain locations? In what sense is that natural? I mean, that certainly involves a tremendous amount of human intervention and human ingenuity and creation. One of the areas in which this comes up all the time is with nutrition. If, for example, I feed a raw diet, some people would argue that that's more natural for my pets than feeding cooked food. But if I take a raw diet and I freeze it, or if I chop it up into little pieces and then freeze dry it and then have you add water to rehydrate it, I mean, is that still natural? It doesn't look anything like what a dog would eat in the wild. And if you take a pug and let it loose in the savannah and ask it to forage for its own food, is that a natural diet for that animal? I think the main reason we use the term natural is simply because we have a sense or an association with it that is benign. We think something must be safe or gentle or beneficial if it's natural, and something is likely to be dangerous or harmful if it's artificial or man-made. I think it's pretty clear, though, that this association isn't very reliable. There are plenty of things in nature which are clearly harmful to us. I see plenty of dogs who eat mushrooms or plants in their backyard and who suffer significant toxic effects from these. And all kinds of infectious organisms, things like salmonella or E. coli that cause diarrhea or vomiting or serious infections, these are clearly present in nature. We didn't create them in a lab somewhere. Even things that sound like they might be artificial, things like asbestos or radiation from uranium, these are actually things found in nature. Human beings didn't invent these. They exist in their natural form in a way that is clearly dangerous to people and to animals. On the other hand, things that are artificial can be beneficial as well as harmful. Certainly, though there's obviously debate about this, antibiotics have dramatically reduced suffering and death in humans and in our companion animals. These were clearly something maybe derived in some sense from nature sometimes, but certainly processed heavily and made in a way that is recognizably artificial. Vaccination, same thing. Vaccines are clearly very beneficial and have reduced suffering and illness. But clearly, taking a portion of an organism and weakening it so that it can't infect people and then putting it into a vaccine and injecting it is not natural in any sense, but it's definitely beneficial. The evidence is quite clear that vaccines have done a great deal of good and considerably less harm than is sometimes claimed. So the distinction between natural and artificial doesn't really tell us anything useful about whether a medicine or a procedure is actually safe or effective or helpful, or whether it's going to do harm. So when somebody comes to me and they're asking about a natural remedy, the first thing I do is ask them, well, what do you mean by that? And then I try to explain to them that natural doesn't necessarily mean safe, and artificial or man-made doesn't necessarily mean harmful. I think one area in which this comes up most clearly is in nutrition. People are always thinking that a natural diet is somehow safer than an artificial or processed diet. But we should think about what that means. What wild animals eat is not the perfect diet optimized for their health and well-being. What they eat is simply what they can get, what they can catch, or what they can find. And malnutrition, parasitism, infectious diseases, injury to predators from trying to capture prey, these are all common in nature. These occur all the time. So it's clear that the natural diet is not necessarily the best diet. On the other hand, cooking food dramatically reduces the risk of infectious disease and parasites, and this has improved the health of humans and animals around the world. And one could argue that cooking is unnatural, but it is clearly beneficial. Same thing with the addition of nutrients to diets. If, for example, we have added vitamin C or vitamin D to products that are food products that human beings eat, and we have eliminated diseases like scurvy or rickets by doing so, I think one could clearly make the case that these are beneficial interventions, even if they are in some sense not natural. Likewise, as I mentioned in my video on raw diets, our companion animals, particularly our dogs, have been bred very intensively for a very long time to be what we want them to be. And they are not in any meaningful sense natural creatures anymore. So the idea that somehow what their ancestors ate must be the healthiest thing for them to eat doesn't really hold much water. Okay, so what have we learned? I think what we've learned is that natural is a word that has a lot of positive associations for many of us, but that in fact doesn't have a very clear meaning. It's very difficult to clearly divide natural and unnatural. There's a spectrum of processing and manipulation that humans do to all things that we use as healthcare remedies, and it's not very clear where we cross the line from natural to artificial. And I think secondly, we've learned that something is not necessarily safe or beneficial just because we label it natural, just because we have done less to it than some other remedy or diet. Something that is natural may very well be harmful, and something that is artificial may very well be healthy or beneficial. So when you're looking for healthcare options for your pets, be careful to understand what those terms natural and artificial mean. Try to remember that what really tells us whether something is safe or in the best interest of our pet is not the label that somebody puts on it when selling it. It's the evidence. It's whether there is good scientific evidence that something is beneficial and safe. I hope this has been helpful and I appreciate your watching. Hope to see you again here at SkepVet TV.